Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of The Sit Down with me, Odhrán Johnson, your host over here on Gaming Sandbox. My first interviewee for this series is going to be a creator that I've been following for a good bit of time now, and if you're anything like me and a fanatic of the old Star Wars Clone Wars TV show, along with the games like Mass Effect, you probably will have seen this guy come up in your recommendations at one point or another. I'm of course talking about Artorr, also known as Parks Harman, who's responsible for some of the greatest video essays on the platform to date. Throughout our interview, we talk about how he got into content creation, starting out with a plethora of channels to begin with, before finding his niche and narrowing down into Artorr, and then I ask kind of how that level of content has grown and evolved over the last few months. So I won't keep you here any longer, so if you enjoy this podcast, please leave a comment down below letting us know who you'd like to see featured next. And with that being said, please sit back, relax, and enjoy. Parks, thank you so much for joining me today on the show. It's an absolute pleasure as well. And I suppose, would you describe yourself as an up-and-coming creator, or would you say you've kind of been around the block enough times now that you feel kind of established?
Relative to my current channel, I feel like up-and-coming, but of course, as you probably know, and some people listening might not be aware of this, but I've been on YouTube for a good bit longer than the current channel I have, Artorr. Mm-hmm. With a previous channel called Artorr, and I mainly did like gameplay videos on there and such. And I've started that channel probably a good 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. I don't really do videos on it anymore. So, but relative to that channel, I would say no. I feel like I've pretty familiar with the YouTube space, but never really had the success there that I'm having now with Artorr. So, mm-hmm. It feels fresh in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you brought up Artorr because I kind of want to start from the beginning and kind of work my way up to your current work. Obviously most people I think will know you for your work on Artorr currently at the moment, which is a very fantastically edited video essay channel on YouTube. And most people will know you for, I think it's fair to say, the analysis of the Clone Wars series that you did.
Yeah.
The 3-part series. And it would be no surprise then to people that at least I think your oldest current live video on Artorr is an introduction to your channel kind of on Clone Wars Adventures. So, you know, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree with your channel. So
no, it does not.
Kind of walk me through kind of how that started. What was it initially that kind of drew your interest to content creation and all that jazz?
As you noted, the first video on my old channel, Artorr, was for Clone Wars Adventures, which, for those of you who are not aware, because you can't really play the game anymore, there's emulators for it and whatnot, but Clone Wars Adventures was like an MMO that tied into the Star Wars The Clone Wars TV show, and every week there was a new episode. You would get new content in the game from that episode. So, you know, you had Darth Maul show up. There was Darth Maul stuff in the game, which was awesome. But I played that game when the show was on the air, and I was at some point, I think, and this is reaching back really far to bear in mind when I started the channel. I think I was in middle school, so it's been a long time, but they added a YouTube record feature to the game, and that was like really tempting. A lot of people were getting into that, and I was thinking about it, but what really pushed me into it, what really pushed me towards sort of doing YouTube, I think, not necessarily 2011. I guess I would say like 2009, 2010, 2011. Those years were like massive for the YouTube gaming space, and like all these channels at the time, like PewDiePie, Tobiscus, like they were experiencing this huge blow up, and a lot of channels, a lot of newcomers to YouTube were realizing like, oh, you can actually like do gaming stuff, like this thing we do on a daily basis. Like there's a platform for it. So I thought about that, and I thought about, well, if there's anything I ever did on YouTube, I would do that. And the other thing that really pushed me towards it was, and this is a bit more of a personal anecdote, I suppose. At the time, as I said, I was in middle school. And I talk about this in my Clone Wars videos, but I was going to a private school for much of like my grade years. That was super duper small. Like no more than 50 kids across several grades. The most amount of kids I ever had in my grade was like, I'd say like no more than 10 or 11, which is insane. Because after that, my parents moved me to the public school system, and suddenly now there were 150 kids in my grade, and that was like massively overwhelming. For me, like that was a big period of growth for me, and not only trying to get to know other people better that I had never really interacted with in my life before, going from a very sheltered environment to this very public space. But it was also one that allowed me to sort of grow as an individual and realize like this creative sort of spark that I discovered that I had. And so YouTube was really just like the most accessible platform to express that. And so, where I felt sort of like not necessarily a nobody, but I felt like people didn't really see me for who I was at school. On the internet, on YouTube, I could do that. I could make videos, and I poured a lot of time into it, and haven't really ever stopped doing that. So safe to say it's stuck.
Yeah, for sure. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, at least currently, of what I could find, you have 4 channels at least that you've either created or been a part of throughout, I think, from 2011 to now, which is Artorr, and then there's the second one, which is Sigh-Tor, spelled S-I-G-H Tour.
Yes.
And then of course there is Artorr, obviously, and then Purpose Beat Productions as well, which is one that you did for creating films and whatnot. I believe I see even the toast poster behind you there.
Oh yeah, and the bread poster. Yeah.
What kind of, obviously on your Sigh-Tor channel, that's now kind of discontinued to this stage, and it was kind of your original, I suppose, experimenting ground for all types of content. I know even on the channel you had gameplay, you did streams, and then of course if you look at your most viewed video, which is kind of a discussion on the Witcher universe, at least in The Witcher 3, that was kind of would it be fair to say kind of the transition into your more video analysis style that you have now?
It was definitely a big part of it. And by the way, I have to say I'm impressed and flattered that you've done so much sort of research on me. For the record, I have started at least 4 channels, but there's, I think, 2 others that are mostly
obviously not enough research.
Yeah, you missed that. One was called Sator's Reviews, which was, and this will answer your question partially. Where I sort of reviewed movies and shows that I was interested in, starting with the Clone Wars during its like 5th season. Because I was doing videos like that for a time on Sigh-Tor, but I sort of, I was like, this isn't the place for this. This is a gaming channel. You do that on the channel. And then I restarted that channel a couple years later and called it Sigh-Tor the Critic. And then I sort of did more reviews on there, sort of different style. Didn't keep up with it. But yeah, I'd say around like 2014, 2015, as I was sort of mostly just doing Let's Play sort of gameplay walkthrough videos on my channel, which were, a pretty big component of the gaming side of YouTube at the time. Today, it's mostly on, that sort of content you can mostly find on Twitch more so than YouTube. But as I was going through that and just being as any creative person understands, like the more you spend time creating, the more your sort of horizons start to open up. And for me, like that's when I started getting into a lot of sort of gaming discussion channels, like a lot of gaming analysis channels, and nothing particularly crazy. I think the big ones at the time were probably like Total Biscuit, Boogie2988, and Angry Joe, and couple of others, and obviously there's been way more since then, but those were channels that got me thinking about like, oh man, like there's more to the video games I'm playing than just like what's on the surface. Like people made this, there's issues with like how it maybe came together, and there's certainly a plethora of controversies attached to how those games sort of were made. And so I wanted to dive into all of that stuff over time, but when The Witcher was coming out, that was a thing where, I saw sort of potential for me to be like, man, I'm not really satisfied with sort of the videos out in the YouTube space right now talking about the Witcher story, like, because the hype for 3 was pretty big at the time, and a lot of people were that was going to be their first Witcher game, And as someone who had played the games and loved the games, I was like a little worried people were not going to like get it. So that's why I made that video to sort of, you know, for newcomers coming into it, be like, hey, this is the Witcher's, you know, this is the story of the books and the games, and now you're ready for The Witcher 3. And it was not a type of content I ever intended doing too much of, but it was definitely like, it was definitely one of the first times where I felt like almost uniquely qualified to make a video about a certain thing on the platform. So yeah, that was definitely fair to say that was a key moment in sort of the type of analysis videos that I've done over time.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, since that Witcher video, then you did a couple of other essay / analysis style videos, namely on stuff like Hitman and on Days Gone, and obviously you mentioned Sator Reviews and the Critic channel. Was the decision to migrate over to Artorr, was that a decision to kind of condense everything into one space, or was that just something you wanted to have a fresh start with?
More so the latter, a fresh start. I think sort of toward the end of working on Sator, at least I should say toward the point where I was, you know, that was no longer like my primary focus. Now it was going to Artorr. Sator is really the only thing I was still working on. You know, I mean, obviously you mentioned Purpose Beat earlier, and that channel's there for when I do short films and stuff. So it's not really something I'm actively making content for. It just felt like the right place to send, you know, my friends and family, be like, hey, check out my short films. But yeah, towards the end, I was, you know, kind of, I guess you could say a little burnt out with what I was doing on Sator. And, you know, during that time I was going into college and going through the ringer of that. And, you know, just sort of figuring out like what I want to do with my future, like my career, you know, because I love, as if, you know, can tell from my short films and Purpose Beat, like I love filmmaking. And, you know, as much as I talk about games on or as much as I did talk about games on Sator and talk about on Artorr, like filmmaking felt like an entry point for me into like this world of creating. Mm-hmm. So I thought about that a lot, you know, when I was in college and sort of thinking about like, you know, what kinds of things do I want to make? And it got me reflecting very hard on Sator. And I think my biggest frustration with Sator over time was, you know, what I enjoyed doing, making videos on when I was like, say, early in high school. Toward the end, I felt like I had sort of moved beyond that, but and so had my audience. And I was still stuck trying to make those videos that I had always made, but my audience had moved on, you know, and part of that as well, I should say, you know, I started my channel covering like Star Wars games, and I wasn't so adamant about doing that anymore because I wasn't over the moon about sort of what EA was doing with their Battlefront games. And I've, you know, been an avid player of Star Wars: The Old Republic over the years, but I wasn't really super active in it at the time. So I kind of wanted to do my own thing, but a lot of my followers weren't sort of following me on that. And I just felt very frustrated with not being able to express what I wanted to express. And so what really finally pushed me to start Artorr and have this fresh start, incidentally, was Borderlands 3. When they announced that game, like it not only brought me back to Borderlands 2 and in the way that, you know, a new movie or a new game is coming out and you're replaying like everything that led up to that, or rewatching everything that led up to that and just reliving everything you loved about it. But it made me like uniquely like sort of grateful for Borderlands 2 and how much that game meant to me. And I felt, as I did with the Witcher video years before, the need to express something which I felt wasn't being expressed. You know, like there's a few Borderlands video essays on YouTube, but the majority of Borderlands content you'll find on YouTube is how to get this gun, or how to get this loot, or the secret boss, or you know, like the gameplay stuff. And for me, like, you know, I felt like at that point I wasn't very good at sort of, if I just do a gameplay video and talk about it, I wouldn't quite be doing it justice to what I personally feel and think. And so for me, like, I saw that as an opportunity to have, like you said, you know, like a fresh start and just start this new chapter, start over. You know, I had these subscribers for years that I was sort of holding on to, these views I was holding on to. Maybe it's time to move on from that. So, and I'm very glad I did.
Mhm. There hasn't been a part of you, obviously I know you do streaming on Twitch as well. Has there been any part of you that has ever thought about maybe going back to that channel at some point? Or are you kind of more so like, okay, that's done, that's a finished chapter now, I want to keep on doing what I'm doing now?
I definitely think about it pretty often, simply because, like, you know, as you can see from all the videos I've done on Artorr over the years, like, I was mainly doing like gameplay videos, but you know, I would do discussion videos, I would do reviews, and then sometimes I would get together with my friends and I would do these little like funtages or montages. You know, it's a pretty popular form of sort of gameplay content on YouTube, and you know, I still have that type of fun and goofing around with my friends. It's just I haven't made videos on it, and I was thinking, like, man, you know, I could really just, I could record that stuff with my friends and try to edit that and put that there. It's just, part of me is like, you know, I don't really have the time to edit that. I'm focusing on this Artorr stuff on top of all the other sort of craziness I got going in my personal life. And, you know, I'm not even sure what people who know me exclusively from Artorr would think if I tweeted out like, hey, check out this video where my friends and I just sort of, you know, goofed off in Grand Theft Auto or something. And it's like, I'm sure people would be cool with it, but, you know, it would just be kind of, I would just imagine how I would feel seeing that, being like, huh, that's kind of weird. But, you know, I might come back to it, and I thought of different things to do with it. And last year, when it was sort of the 10th anniversary of the channel, I was like, all right, I'm going to do I've always wanted to do one of those draw my life videos, but I actually have to live a life first. So I was thinking, like, maybe now's the time to do it. Now it's been 10 years, but I didn't get around to it. So yeah, the door's not closed on Artorr. It's just the lights aren't on at the moment, I guess, is a poetic way of putting it.
Obviously, with Artorr now, I think the content itself, you know, takes a lot longer than the general stuff you were doing before. You've got these at times, you know, over an hour long videos. I believe that'd be the majority of your content. And really, it's not like an hour of just a stream or whatever. It's condensed information, you know, that you've painfully gone through, I can imagine.
Yeah.
You know, would you say that, you know, there's a specific style you have been inspired by, or a creator you've been inspired by for that channel now? Or is it maybe more an accumulation of all the experience you've had from previous channels?
A bit of both of those things. You know, there are definitely channels that have inspired me over the years that ultimately, like, you know, made me believe that I could do that. I would say channels like White Light, which I love. Channels like Joseph Anderson, who are known for these crazy, like, 3-hour, 5-hour analysis videos. Yeah, channels like that. I'd say even going as far back as like Total Biscuit. That's a content creator, you know, now that he's passed away, rest in peace. I end up revisiting his content every once in a while, and especially at the time I was thinking of doing Artorr. I was thinking, like, man, this guy he brought such a intellectuality and nuance to these conversations that I can only, like, dream of having, you know. And so those channels really made me believe that I could try it. And then ultimately the culmination of all those years of ultimately successes and failures on my channel, from having periods where the channel was very successful to periods where, you know, I was just putting out videos for months and I was not getting the viewership I expected, and maybe being met with disappointment, to sort of different periods of reinvention on my channel where I'd rebrand myself and be like, hey, we're doing 2 types of videos now. We're doing discussion videos and we're doing these fun edits with my friends. Ultimately, all of that allowed me to learn the lessons that have helped me make Artorr what it is. So yeah, no, and that being said, like, I'm constantly inspired, I'd say, by, like, other content creators I come across. I'm a bit scatterbrained at the moment, But you know, I otherwise I would name drop like specific channels. But yeah, no, I'm constantly sort of seeing channels and other content creators and sort of what they're trying to express, and you know, even outside of like the video essay community, like even channels that are just sort of doing what I used to do, but they've taken it several steps further with say like sort of the funtage edits, where God, I don't remember the channel name, but it's this guy did an edit of the Mass Effect trilogy, and it was just a bunch of jokes and memes, and it was hilarious. But stuff like that just reminds me, like, while I'm working on it, like, hey, this isn't just, you know, you're not just reviewing this, you're not just talking about this, you're not just telling a story, but you're also trying to like entertain people. So yeah, no, I yeah, definitely been inspired, as well as learned from everything up to making Artorr.
And obviously, I mentioned it near the beginning, that most people would have been maybe aware of your content through sort of the blow up of those Clone Wars videos. You know, kind of as somebody who's been creating content since 2011 onwards, and obviously that content has changed quite a bit, was that a huge shock to you? Like, how did that happen? Was it an overnight sort of thing that those blew up, or was it the course of maybe a couple of weeks?
Definitely, I the most accurate way of putting it would be like over weekend, because I remember, and it's not always this. I don't know how other channels sort of interpret their blow up, but for me, like, it was just a very, I would say, algorithmically perfect day, for, I think it was December 10th at the end of 2020. That was the same day you had the Game Awards, where The Last of Us Part 2 like cleared a bunch of awards, and I had a video on The Last of Us. That the Disney Plus had Disney had like an investors conference for Disney Plus, and that's when they announced like 1 billion Star Wars and Marvel shows, many of which were like Clone Wars spinoffs. And then that was also the day Cyberpunk came out, and I was playing that. I remember streaming that, and going between that and then looking at the Disney Plus stuff, and then the Game Awards were on. And then over the weekend, like the Last of Us video was blowing up, the Clone Wars videos were blowing up. It was just super surreal. And like, like a few people have asked me, like, how do you interpret like getting big on YouTube? And I tell them, like, I think it's honestly, it's 50% hard work, 50% luck. And that's a sentiment that gets, that certainly, I'm not the first person to say that of YouTube, but yeah, like it's just surreal. And not only that, but like all of the feedback I was getting from the Clone Wars videos and the Last of Us videos was like extremely positive. And like some of the, like that month leading into January, probably some of the nicest compliments I feel like I've ever received in my life, just from strangers on the internet who found my videos. And it was also just crazy too to consider, like, these were videos that I made months before, and I had sort of closed the book on it. I had reflected on what I might have done differently on it already, or what I was proud of having done on it. And here everyone was finding it and picking out specific things that I didn't really have an audience for to pick out those things yet. So I was like, that's crazy. Like, so yeah, surreal to I guess is maybe the simplest way to put it. And in some ways I'm still a little taken aback by it. Well, like over a year later, really just the generosity and kindness of so many people. Yeah, it's been humbling, and I'm very grateful for it.
Obviously, you mentioned earlier that, a big reason for you wanting to switch channel for the fresh start was because you had made a lot of content on Star Wars and Star Wars media at the time. And, when you tried to do new stuff, maybe not so many people were interested in kind of viewing that. Now that obviously you've come over to Artorr and, again, this Star Wars property has been one of your most viewed videos. Are you worried that there might be a similar trend again, or are you more so happy now that, because, you know, obviously you mentioned the Last of Us video blew up at the same time as well, and you've obviously diversified your content quite a good bit in that sense as well?
It is, you know, it's definitely a concern I've had just because I've been down that road before, and it's something, it's something that the algorithm does, but it's also just like a fact of having an audience. You know, in some cases, like the audience is there for something, and they're not always there for me. You know, sometimes they're there because of the thing I'm talking about, and maybe they've appreciated my take on it, but not that they're always going to show up for every video I do that's not related to that specific thing. Especially if the thing I'm talking about next is something they plan to experience, for example, Mass Effect, and they haven't played it yet, and they don't want to have spoilers, or, you know, whatever the case is. So it's definitely something I do worry about, but I'm regularly assured that I don't have to be too concerned. You know, I'd say, like, in regards to the Mass Effect videos I've done, the first Mass Effect video, I think when I released it in like a 2-week period, and as a disclaimer to anyone listening, like, you know, views are a useful metric for me. They're a useful metric for any content creator, but I can personally say, like, I'm not motivated by views, and views aren't like the be all end all of success for me. Being able to express what I have expressed as well as I can express it is its own reward for me. But that being said, the first video, when I released it, I think in a 2-week period, accumulated like 5,000 views, which compared to the Star Wars Rebels video I had put out before that, a couple months before, in a 2-week period had accumulated, I think, like 75,000 views or something like that. So I felt like, man, like, people did not want to show up for that one. And that's when I was like kind of really worried, like, oh man, like maybe I'm one video too far into sort of pigeonholing myself. But then, you know, I just released the Mass Effect 2 video recently, and in 2 weeks that got 50,000 views. So literally 10 times better than the first video. So you never know. And I had people, like, I was on a Star Wars podcast a few weeks ago, and they were promoting my video to their accounts, even though they, you know, they're mostly like a Star Wars like news account. They were promoting my videos, which was super generous. And you know, like that assured me, like, oh yeah, there's people who, you know, are here to support what I'm saying, regardless of what it's about, which is, you know, you don't always get that. And that's, you know, again, something I'm humbled and grateful for. So you know, rest assured, as I go forward, I think at some point, like, the bigger the channel is, the more I'll be able to branch out and have it do just fine. While also being able to talk about all the Star Wars things that I love, because, you know, I love Star Wars, but I also love, like, the variety of things over here as well.
Just for kind of clarity, the podcast you're talking about, that was the Old Republic podcast, was it? If I'm correct in saying that?
Well, it's funny. They actually, I think they did tweet about it. But the one I was thinking of was the Star Wars Exchange podcast.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. And just as well, the video you talk about that didn't do very well, is that the Miles Morales video you're thinking of, or was it a different one?
I was referring to the Mass Effect, the first Mass Effect.
Oh, the first
video.
Mass Effect one. Perfect.
Yeah.
When it kind of goes into the process of making your videos, is there a specific formula you're following? Because obviously when you change from media, you know, a video on Raiders of the Lost Ark is going to be very different to a video on Mass Effect. But is there a sort of a concrete sort of, okay, this one I'm going to do at the beginning, middle, and end? Is that something you're taking into account, or how do you approach each project like that?
There's definitely a formula. There's definitely a pipeline I generally follow. With video games, obviously that pipeline is a little bit more complicated because, you know, like you said, Raiders of the Lost Ark, 2-hour movie. I sit down. I might watch it a few times and take notes on it each time, but it still will not hold a candle to the amount of prep I have to do on, say, Mass Effect. You know, where each game, first game's like, you could, you know, it's a 25-hour game. And then I'm doing that twice. I'm doing a Paragon Femshet playthrough, and then a Renegade Maleshet playthrough. And so that's 50 hours. And then Mass Effect 2, 40-hour game for both characters. Again, 80 hours. And I'm doing Mass Effect 3 right now, and I'm almost at the end of my Paragon playthrough, but now I have a Renegade one to get through, and that whole time I'm taking notes. So yeah, that part can vary quite a bit, and maybe, you know, again, I might want to go back in the game and replay some stuff and revisit certain things just to make sure I heard it correctly, or I might revisit my recordings. But yeah, it'll start with that. I'll take notes, you know, during that period, and then from there I'll go into writing, and I might do a little bit of the editing. If I do, it'll be like the intro. The intro is usually sort of like an isolated thing I try to think about if it's not like super woven into the video. I'll do the writing. I'll maybe do, I want to say 2 or 3 drafts of the script. And then I'll record it, and then I get into editing, and that can take, you know, for an hour-long video, the Mass Effect 2 video took me about 3.5 weeks to edit, I think. And so from that, I basically do, I cut up the narration that I recorded. Then I'll do what I call the audio pass. So, I'll add in the music. I'll add in some of the sound effects, not all of them. Some of them I'll add in sort of the intermissory clips where I throw a clip on the screen where I'm not talking. It's a clip from the game or the movie or the show. That will go in the audio pass. And then because, you know, sometimes I'll have music like weave in and out of certain clips. So that goes in there. And then I do the video pass, and that's, you know, dropping in all the clips. Then I do the effects pass where I'm doing color correction. I'm adding sort of adjustment layers to different footage. That's when I put up like the text pop-ups that I have. I'll put the sound effects with that as well if they're not already there. Then I record the outro, I edit the credits, and boom, you have a video.
So by no means an easy process.
No, but thankfully, you know, I've done it enough times by now that it's in my head, like I know the next thing coming. And I would say each time I do it, it gets quicker and easier. But with each video, I've made it a sort of a personal challenge for myself to try to do like something that I don't know how to do. Whether it's a small thing in the editing or like some sort of technique where I'm weaving in writing with the editing, you know. So I'm always trying to. So each video invariably takes longer than the previous one, but certain parts of it I get better at.
Do you think there's at least for your content when you're creating it, is there a different approach you have to take when looking at, say, a game that's more heavily choice-based and more open, like Mass Effect, as opposed to something that's very much more tailored, catered experience like The Last of Us?
Yes. I mean, I would say generally my process of analysis is the same. I'll take notes. I'm usually looking for motifs, or themes, or if something sticks out to me, like why did they do that with that character? I'll write that down. But with an RPG or a choice-driven game where it's more open-ended, it gets a bit more complicated because I try to make it at least a bit more of a goal for myself when I'm talking about those games to consider that the narrative or the story that the player walks away with is not going to be the same for everybody. And so I can go about that a couple different ways and trying to accommodate for like the variation in the player experience. You know, Mass Effect, I would say, makes it pretty well. No, I won't use the word easy. I'll say like it seems like it, like there's on the surface there's a quality of it that seems like it would be easy to sort of structure this as, what is this experience like for a Paragon player, and then what is this experience like for a Renegade player? But then, of course, in Mass Effect, like you have Paragade playthroughs where people are doing a little bit of both, and then you have Mass Effect 2 where certain companions might die, and so I'm interpreting like why those companions might die. So with a choice-driven game, I'm trying to interpret not only what the developer's intentions are, but also what the player's intentions might be, and what kind of story does that ultimately tell, and all as much variation as I can reasonably discuss, versus, you know, the more tailored experience where I'm strictly looking at what the developer is trying to say.
Obviously, I know you're now working on a Mass Effect 3 video. Can subscribers expect an Andromeda video after that, or is that something you're not too interested in tackling?
I had no interest in it at first, but I did get a fair amount of comments on it on the Mass Effect 2 video. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's a way I can talk about it. Truth be told, I haven't played very much of Andromeda. I'm very familiar with it. Like what happens in the story and the gameplay, and I've seen all the reviews and all the critiques on it, so I'm pretty aware of it. Kind of in the same way I was pretty aware of Rebels after doing the Clone Wars videos, despite not having seen the show all the way through. And so, it's something I could do. It's just, I say if there's one type of content that I don't feel like totally comfortable with, or I should say atone for my content that I'm not like 100% confident with or totally figured out an approach for, is content where where I feel like the criticism maybe outweighs the appreciation. And not that you can't have criticism presented in a positive way. You absolutely can. And that's something I strive for with every video. It's just with a game like that, I invariably I feel like I'm walking into the conversation with my hands held up going like, hey, like, this is just what I think. Like, I'm not going to try and point out everything that's wrong or about the experience. That was certainly like a challenge of the Star Wars Rebels video I did. Was this is, for those who are not overly familiar with sort of the Star Wars canon and like the animation side of things, Clone Wars, widely revered as an amazing, groundbreaking show. Rebels does not really get the same appreciation. And so I felt like a challenge to like try to point out all the things that I liked about it in a way that was unique to the way I could say it. So it would have to be the same thing with the Andromeda video. So that's the long answer. Short answer, it's not in the immediate docket, but it could happen in the future.
And do you think, I mean, obviously judging off a lot of your videos, bar maybe a few like Cyberpunk and of course Miles Morales I'm thinking of, is it something that you prefer more to look at games in retrospect now a couple of years later, or is it something that you're kind of not really too fussed either way?
Honestly, for me, if I'm being like, I would probably usually say I'm not too fussed about it. Like, I could do both and both have worked, but I would feel most comfortable, or I feel most comfortable talking about it after a little bit of time has passed, say like a year or two. What a person can say about Cyberpunk 3 months after it came out is very different than what they will say about it a year and 3 months later, especially now that, patch 1.5 is out and the game is much, much better. The narrative about Cyberpunk is very different. And with that, there's also more information about the game's development from that time that has elapsed. And so that's information that it could be very useful for me if I wait long enough to sort of get the, get the sort of reporting on that and to get the full story, the full picture of it. So that being said, when I do jump into a project after it has come out or shortly after it's come out, like Cyberpunk Miles Morales or, for instance, the Star Wars Bad Batch video I did last year, I am bearing in mind that, okay, like this is not going to be super crazy in depth about behind the scenes stuff. Cyberpunk video was a slight exception because there just was so much information about the game's development at the time. But with like the Miles Morales video and then with the Bad Batch video, that's, when I sat down and made those videos, like, okay, I'm going to kind of be vague here with behind the scenes stuff because I don't know a whole lot. And, that I need to accommodate for what I lack there in discussion with a more in-depth discussion in another area or realm. So the short answer again, like probably just a little bit of time. Enough time that has passed that people have not lost interest in it. There's not been too much discourse about it already. I feel like I can enter the discussion with like the full picture and be able to say what I want to say.
And do you think maybe in the future there is a particular dream video that you want to make someday?
Yes. I will reveal two of them. One, of course, being a Star Wars fan, I want to talk about the Star Wars saga at some point, and this will be a series of videos. But you know, my goals for them are beyond what I am, let's just say, financially capable of doing right now. So that'll be far out in the future when I have the ability to do it. The other side of it, and the very similar reasoning here, I want to talk about the Assassin's Creed games. And that's another project where beyond just sort of what I want to do with it, being something that require money, it will also require a lot of time, because there's a lot of Assassin's Creed games, and I'm in my head, I'm like, do I talk about like the ones people like? Do I do the Ezio games in one video? I don't know. So yeah, those are two dream projects at the moment, with pretty lofty sort of ambitions behind them. So don't expect them anytime soon, viewers or folks, but maybe one day.
And obviously, I've mentioned a few times in this video that you've done videos on The Witcher, or The Witcher 3 in particular. Is that a sort of a series, or even just a game in general, that you're hoping to give the Artorr treatment at some point?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that's another, that's another conversation, like a series of videos I'd like to do at some point. Earlier I mentioned Joseph Anderson, love his channel. He is in the middle of doing a Witcher series right now, and he's been working on a Witcher 3 video that's, God, I think from what he said is going to be over 8 hours long. And it sounds ridiculous. Like, it sounds like, why would anyone watch that? But if you watch his previous two videos, he is thorough. He is amazingly thorough. And, that amazes me. I'll never make a video that long. If I do talk about The Witcher 3, I think the challenge for me will be trying to keep it under 2 hours. That's sort of my rule. Never make a video longer than 2 hours. And so far I'm done good with that. But so it'll happen at some point. That's just another one of those things where I'd say, much like Mass Effect at the moment, because there's so many great videos about it. For me to come into it, I'd want to feel really good about the take I have and what I can say about it. So yeah, one day.
Yeah. And I think obviously with a lot of creators, the main thing when going in to tackle, I suppose, a property that's so well known like Mass Effect, Star Wars, there is, as you mentioned, kind of this degree of skepticism among somebody going in, like, am I adding to the conversation? Is this just resaturated content again? How do you kind of approach that? What stage do you need to get to be happy with a video to make it worth making?
I honestly, I'd say a lot of it I worry about down the line of like when I'm in the middle of making the video and I've already well decided to make it. But starting out the gate, the sort of hope I have, or the thing that gives me, like I said, gives me hope that I will be able to add to the discussion in a significant way, that this isn't just another take, that I'm not just putting another video out there for the YouTube masses, that this is something truly special, is if I've had what I feel is a unique emotional connection to it. Certainly the case with something like the Clone Wars, because, as I talk about at length in those videos, like, I grew up with that show, and that show is so very special to me and has defined a lot of who I am. Going into those videos, I felt, very dignified and what I wanted to say, because I genuinely believed like no one else could say what I was going to say. With something like Mass Effect, I love those games, and one of my best friends, who I actually, he's in the special thanks for each of the Mass Effect videos so far. He's the person who introduced me to the series, and that game, those games are such a big part of our friendship. And in general, those games, especially Mass Effect 3. I mean, heck, today I was playing the Citadel DLC today. I was actually recording that. Is a lot about friendship and about found family. And those are ideas, you find those in Star Wars. And obviously they're very emotional, impactful ideas there, but they're just as emotionally impactful to me in Mass Effect. So yeah, really it's just about finding something that I emotionally like really resonate with and connect with. And if I feel it like in my heart and in my head, when I sit down and write it, that will come through. And when I try to edit it, if I'm loyal to what I wrote and what I felt, it will come through again in the editing. And hopefully by the time the video is out, you still feel that. In general, that's one of the challenges of making art is when you dream up something or when you think of something, is trying to follow it through all the way to the end, bearing in mind the compromises that have to be made and sort of, your resources, your budget, your time, or even just your, like, can you do this? Like, can this be done technically? Do you know how to write this? Can I effectively communicate how this moment makes me feel? So I think that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
I suppose to round it off, we've talked a good bit about the work that you've done, some of the dream projects you want to do. What can people hope to expect in sort of the near future for your channel?
I would just say expect what you've known from me so far. Going forward, I want to be a little bit more experimental. I think I've developed an approach that people will recognize me for very well by now. One that's not like supremely unique to the YouTube space, but what I want to just keep doing going forward is try to just keep, like I said earlier, try to keep challenging myself, and that will come through hopefully in making a better video. And I would say just to give some more direct teases, the first video I'm really going to try this with, at least at the moment in terms of what I have planned, is a video on The Mandalorian. So look forward to that, viewers of mine. It'll hopefully be really cool. And then, just going forward from that, there's some other cool stuff that I'm going to do. I'll give another tease as well, just because I'm so excited about it, and can't wait to do more with it. As I said earlier, I'm an avid player of Star Wars: The Old Republic. The game is 10 years old now. I think it just turned 10 in December. It's, currently the 10th anniversary of the game, and there's a new expansion out and all that stuff. I am going to start working on a video for that soon. I've sort of planned a lot of it out already. It's going to be a lot of work, going through all the classes and sort of doing behind the scenes stuff. But that will probably be out much later in the year. So that's a video I'm very excited to do. So yeah, there you go.
Brilliant. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Parks. I want to throw it over to you one last time, though. Where can people find you online? How can they support your work?
Of course, you can find me first and foremost on YouTube as Artorr. Of course, you've watched this whole video, or listened to this whole interview, so you're probably pretty aware of that. But you can also follow me on Twitter at Parks Harman. You can follow me on Instagram as Parks Harman. You can follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Cytor. Even though I don't really do videos on Cytor anymore, I still keep the name on Twitch, and I stream once in a while. So yeah, that about covers it.
Well, brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Odhrán. Thank you for having me.